Hey, what's happening, YouTubers? Welcome to another Marvel Retro Review here on the Pack Photos YouTube channel. And today's Retro Review, we're going to take a look at the old school Toybiz Marvel Hall of Fame Black Symbiote Suit Spider-Man figure. I did just pick this up recently at my local toy shop, Tosche Station. Y'all have heard me shout them out before in my recent review of the Darth Vader Black Series figure. And like I mentioned in that review and in this one, if you're ever in the DC or DMV area, I highly recommend checking them out. I'll leave a link to their IG in the description below. So if we take a look at the front of the packaging, you can see images of Wolverine, Colossus, and Spider-Man. I think that's kind of cool how they have Colossus holding up the Marvel Hall of Fame logo. You see the old school Marvel Comics logo on the top, and then the Toybiz logo on the bottom. And essentially, this wave of figures was just reissues of old school Toybiz figures that found success in the line. It also gave new collectors of the game a chance to purchase figures that they might have missed back then. For example, this Black Suit Spider-Man. So any collectors out there, new or old to the game, that complain about reissues and reuses, it's something that's been going on for decades, y'all. This ain't anything new. And on the back of the packaging, you see this kind of Coliseum pillars like framed around the box, but it says Marvel Hall of Fame. And the read-up is, it's Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Iceman against Venom in a battle to the finish. Unable to subdue the symbiote villain, help arrives in the form of Invisible Woman, bearing the Fantastic Four Sonic Blaster, and though he is an unpredictable foe, one thing is certain, against the power of the world's greatest superheroes, Venom doesn't stand a chance. I really don't understand what that read-up has to do with this figure, but it's whatever. And then on the right, you see the different type of articulations. It says, Super Posable Spidey has 15 different moving joints. Bend him, twist him, fold him to create those amazing spider poses. And the cool thing is, I mean, nowadays you're like, wow, 15 posable parts, that's nothing. This was a big deal back in the day. And it was a big deal as most figures back in the day only had about like 5 points of articulation, which you saw previously with that Morph review I did. Anyways, enough about all that. Let's go and get Spider-Man out of the box. Here is Spider-Man out of the box, and let's take a look at the trading card that he comes with. So it looks like it comes with a trading card, and the trading card is a Mystique. It looks like it's part of Flair's Marvel Annual. And on the back of it, you see Destined for Revenge. There is a read-up on it. Feel free to pause it if you want to go ahead and read it. Unlike the Morph figure, though, this thing was actually packaged nicely in the box on the plastic clamshell. It wasn't like just taped on. All right, now let's take a look at the figure itself. And first things first, this is using the same body mold as the Super Posable Spider-Man figure that came out a couple years back before this one was released. They just repainted it in the symbiote suit. But it's super posable, especially for back in the day. And I'm just looking at it right now. Like when we really break it down and look at the articulation, this thing's pretty advanced for its time. It has a diaphragm cut. Like it has a lot of range of motion in terms of that diaphragm cut, which has more than, like, that's about as far as it can go. So it has a lot of posability in there. It has a shoulder swivel, and it does move out like that and swivel right there. It has single jointed elbows, and the wrist also articulates. When we compare it to like a regular Toybiz figure that came out at the same time, like this Morph figure, for example, this was a standard when it came to Toybiz 5-inch articulation. Basically, it just had your most basic articulation, but still good for its time. Don't get me wrong. You could move the arms up and down. There was articulation on the elbows. The legs could move out and articulation on the knees. And there was also a waist swivel. However, when it came to the Super Posable Spider-Man, like I mentioned, when you break down the articulation, it was pretty advanced. You can move the arms out where you couldn't with the old Toybiz figures. You had the diaphragm cut right here where it wasn't existent on the other Toybiz figures. And also, the legs had articulation on the ankles. Like you could move the ankle up and down, and also the wrist as well. The wrist had movement, whereas on the original Toybiz Bucks, they didn't have that much motion. So when you break it down, this figure did exactly what it was advertised. It was a super posable Spider-Man. Now, when looking at the paint applications, it looks pretty clean, especially for back in the day from Toybiz. One thing I will say, though, when it comes to the eyes being painted on there, they look a little wonky and uneven, and they just look like fat Nike check marks. Like, it could have been a little bit better, but when looking at the rest of the paint application, like in the logo and the chest here, it looks really clean. And the cool thing is I do like how they continued with that white throughout his torso, so that usually sometimes some companies will just stop right here, so when you move it up, it's like this black piece, so it's not even. So kudos to Toybiz back in the day for that. And also you can see the dots painted on his web shooters right there. For those of you who don't know, with the Symbiote Suit Spider-Man, the web shooters come out of this part, not under his hand, like it typically does with his original suit. But yeah, overall, just a fantastic job with the paint application on here. Toybiz was really ahead of its time and did a lot in terms of pioneering how action figures should be. You see on the back the little trademark stuff right there. Now, aesthetically, in today's terms, like you might see these things, they say, oh, they look ugly. But for the time back then, it wasn't that big of a deal because this was very advanced, like I mentioned, in terms of articulation. All right, now I'm going to jump right into size comparisons. And first size comparison, here is Spider-Man sitting next to that Toybiz Morph I just reviewed recently. And next size comparison, here he is sitting next to a couple Marvel Legends Spider-Man. We have the Marvel Legends Retro Spider-Man and the Marvel Legends Symbiote Spider-Man, aka the Just J. Hernandez Spider-Man. And even though I didn't review this figure, I just want to say this buck looks way better with this symbiote suit than it did for the original suit. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. And last size comparison, here he is standing next to the Marvel Legends Stan Lee. Alright, some overall thoughts on this figure? Well, there's two. Typically with retro reviews, y'all, there's always two thoughts. Through the lens of a collector today, I think it's still a nice, solid figure. It has decent articulation, but there is some stuff that's missing that we're accustomed to by today's standards. For example, this figure would have really benefited with a wrist swivel and a thigh swivel and an ankle pivot. But it's still a nice figure nonetheless, especially in terms of today's standards and collecting. If you're able to find this anywhere between the $15 to $30 price point, still on card, I highly recommend it for today's standards. Through the lens of a collector back in the 90s, this is absolute fire. Like, this is such a dope figure. Because the articulation was unheard of back in the day. Like, they didn't have this type of range, especially on a Spider-Man figure until this came out. So through the lens of a collector back in the 90s, this is an absolute buy. It's probably one of the best posable Spider-Man figures we've ever had in the 90s, apart from the stuff with Marvel Legends in the 2000s. It really makes me miss Toybiz when you see the advances they made with articulation and figures and what they used to do with the brand. But I think Hasbro has more than picked up the slack that's been missing since Toybiz has been gone. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, YouTubers. What do you think about this figure? Did you ever have this growing up, or did you pick this up back in the day? And like always, if you like what you see, be sure to hit that like button. If you haven't already yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And here's Spider-Man out of the box, and he doesn't come with any accessories. Oh, god damn it.